Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India, India's voice to the world. I am Tanvi Taneja. Minister of State for Electronics and IT Skill and Entrepreneurship, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, is addressing a press conference right now in New Delhi on the outcome of the G20 Digital Economy Ministers' document. Let's go live there.
And an expansion of the digital economy. Over the several rounds of digital economy ministers' meetings, there has been extreme awareness building and consensus around the three topics that shaped or that were in the agenda of the digital economy ministers' meetings. The first one being the digital public infrastructure. Second, cyber security in the digital economy. And the third, digital skills. And digital public infrastructure in particular, I think it is a very safe thing to say today that there has been, for the first time ever, a global consensus and what ought to be the definition, the framework, and the principles of digital public infrastructure. From the Indian context, as you are aware, our Prime Minister launched this intense digitalization process way back in 2015 with the launch of Digital India. And India has seen several DPIs that have been created. And I can safely say that the DPI conversations today that are being held across the world and have, in a sense, being amplified by these G20 conversations is an exciting conversation, has gained momentum in the context of this presidency, Indian presidency of the G20. India is now a case study, a nation that has employed and deployed technological tools for progress and growth. And this is increasingly being seen by countries that have lagged behind as a way to follow India's lead, taking the India DPI, an open source digital infrastructure, and using this to create the same impact that India has. We have further, in these G20 conversations, understood how the DPI is a powerful mechanism of inclusion, especially for countries of the global south. And one of the aspects that has been discussed is mobilizing finance for DPIs and helping countries that have lagged behind in the digitization process to also get a leg up and move ahead. India, in particular, has already signed 8 MOUs where the India stack and the India DPI will be made available free of cost, open source, for countries that have signed the MOUs to implement in their own countries and to create their own ecosystems of innovation and developers that support their DPIs. On cybersecurity in the digital economy, again, the G20 digital economy ministers have had wide-ranging discussions on why it is important for businesses to be protected, why businesses' cybersecurity are an important issue for all the countries of the world, especially the G20, to be focused on, because the digital economy, as you can see, is becoming an increasingly larger component of economic progress and global economy. And in the Indian context, the digital economy has grown from 4.5% in 2014 to about 11% today and is expected to touch 20% by 25-26. On digital skilling and skills for this new post-COVID increasingly digital world, India's talent, our focus on creating digital skills for our youth is again something that has resonated during these discussions, and India has, and I believe many countries are interested in partnering amongst themselves and with India on creating digitally ready, future-ready, skilled talent to deal with the challenges and opportunities of the coming decade, which our Honorable Prime Minister refers to as TechAid, a decade of technology opportunities. I can certainly say that the Indian approach on DPI, and indeed this global recognition of what DPI is, demolishes the old normals, which was about large tech companies dominating technology and digitization, and paves the way for a new normal where democratizing technology, access to technology, open source, nimble, consumer-driven, and non-intermediated DPIs that are all part of the framework that the world hopefully will embrace and move forward on. So this is broadly what I wanted to share with you. It is a very exciting time for all those who are participants in the digital economy in general. I think it is also a very exciting time when the G20 recognizes the power of DPI, and I am certainly hopeful, and I can even move beyond hopeful and say I'm certainly sure that the outcomes and the discussions during these digital economy ministers' meetings during this presidency of by India of the G20 will certainly have a lasting impact on the shape of the world in the coming years and the decade. Thank you.
So maybe take questions now. The floor is open for your questions. Whoever's asking, please raise your hand, introduce your name and organization before you begin, please. Here, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Minister. My name is Mujib Mashal from the New York Times. First, a quick question of clarification on the 8 MOUs you mentioned. Could you possibly share the countries that those have been signed with? That is one. The second is there's very clear excitement around DPI and around digital being as a big part of India's growth. But every time the momentum builds towards that, the hurdles actually end up being domestic. And we've seen from Manipur to Kashmir to actually to Nu recently that the vulnerability in flare-ups domestically, in fact, end up being digital that is that manifests in the digital front first. How does India ensure that it is narrative of growth, both domestically and internationally, is not hindered and not vulnerable to the flare-ups and tensions that are so frequent domestically?
So obviously this is a question that just goes beyond the G20 context, but I'll certainly say this in terms of how we are approaching our policy making. And this is a global phenomenon. The fact that technology, which was for many, many years seen as a force for good, is also today hosting user harm, is hosting misinformation, and the collateral and the consequent damages that are caused by those type of actors or those type of activities is an unfortunate, universally experienced phenomenon. From our point of view, our government, our Prime Minister has been very clear for some years now that our approach to policy making is, on one hand, continue to intensify the digitization of our economy, creating more and more opportunities for our startups, impacting governance and democracy in a positive way through using digital DPIs. On the other hand, ensuring that the policy framework is aimed at ensuring that the internet is open, as in free from any monopolies or duopolies or market disruptive forces, is safe and trusted, which deals with all of the issues of user harm, including but not limited to misinformation and incitement and all of that, and is also accountable. The asymmetry between the big tech platforms that innovate, that exploit the internet for business, versus the small user, the little guy who uses the internet, that asymmetry is being addressed with our own framework of laws and rules to create accountability and transparency. So we think we have set out, we have DPDP, which is the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, which deals with one aspect, which is privacy and data protection of user harm. And we will roll out multiple things that are aimed at ensuring that the internet, as it delivers good, as it delivers inclusion, as it delivers transformational governance, also has the necessary guardrails to prevent user harm and prevent misinformation and misuse.
So that was Minister of State of IT and Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, briefing media on the outcomes of the G20 Digital Economy Ministers Meet. The minister informed that India's approach on digital public infrastructure is to share the technology with countries in need and also democratizing technology through open source mechanisms. And he told that it was a good time to be in India, where India is hosting the G20 presidency, and the G20, the grouping, recognizes the power of sharing digital public infrastructure. He also informed that 8 MOUs have been signed where India will share its digital stack and India's DPI with countries in need. So this briefing coming to us live from New Delhi. And now let's move on in our bulletin. Let's take you to Southeast Asia, where the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Leaders Summit, ASEAN Annual Summit, has kicked off in Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi there to discuss a range of issues. Speaking at the opening ceremony of the summit, ASEAN host and Indonesian President Joko Widodo had this to say.
Don't turn our ship, ASEAN, as an arena for rivalries that cause mutual destruction. Instead, use this ASEAN ship as an arena for cooperation to create prosperity, to create stability, to create peace, not only for the region, but for the world.
As the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visits Indonesia for the summit, DD India's Vishal Baristo takes a look at how Indian food is becoming more and more popular in the Southeast Asian nation.
This restaurant in Jakarta has a very peculiar Indian connection. This door is from the Pink City, Jaipur in India. It is quite exotic in nature, and this restaurant serves Indian food. And many Indonesians come here to enjoy Indian cuisine. Now this table is full of Indian dishes. They have samosa, they have dahi puri, and they have chicken biryani also. This is so very famous in India, but in Jakarta, it's definitely quite a treat. I have some Indonesians here. Let's talk to them and find out. What's your name?
Hikmah.
Hikmah, what are you having and what makes you come here?
I like chicken tikka. This is chicken tikka because I like the taste of Indian food. Like similar with Indonesia. That samosa, this is similar with Indonesian food, so that's why I come here.
So what is so special about Indian food?
I like biryani.
You like biryani?
Yes, I like biryani. Saya suka dahi puri and mango lassi, very good.
So I actually like the chili chicken because it's new. It's a new taste. So I love trying new cuisine. So I like Indian food also because it's similar. It has lots of herbs.
The owner of this restaurant is
Namaste Ganesha. Ek Sanskriti is the name of my restaurant. I'm Shilpa Dave. I have been very blessed that they really have started accepting the Indian food, Indian cuisine, and we follow the authentic recipe.
What is so special about Indian food?
I think this food suitable with Indonesian tongue.
So there you see these people, they are all from Indonesia, but they have a connect with India, as I've already told you, with cameraman Sanjay Jaina in Jakarta. This is Vishal Baristo with DD India.
Next, more news on the build-up of the G20 summit that is going to be held here in New Delhi this week. So the G20 Finance Deputies meeting began in New Delhi on Tuesday ahead of the main summit. Finance deputies from member states, including the United States, the United Kingdom, the UAE, and Council of European Union and Spain were present at the meeting. Leaders from the group of 20 major economies will start a summit in India's capital on Saturday. New Delhi has undergone a makeover to welcome leaders from around the world for the G20 summit. DD India correspondent Dibendu Mondal tells us more.
India is ready to host the G20 summit. The city is going through a makeover. The city lawns manicured, gardens laid out to welcome the delegates. From fountains to stone sculptures, Indian pride lined up along the streets. Bharat Mandapam, the main summit venue, is an example of India's infrastructural marvel. The city walls are painted with murals depicting the Indian culture, from Indian traditional dance sequences to Indian mythological characters adorn the walls of Delhi. India is ready, waiting to lay out the red carpet for its guest with the theme, One Earth, One Family, One Future. It will showcase to the world its cultural and economic prowess. The infrastructural development and beautification will not only stay back with the visiting delegates, it will remain with this city and its citizens forever. This is Dibyendu Mondal from New Delhi for DD India.
Now let's take a closer look at the member nations and the prominent men and women taking part in this year's 18th G20 summit. Here's a profile of Yoon Suk-yeol, President of the Republic of Korea.
Yoon Suk-yeol, born in 1960, is the President of the Republic of Korea. He has a master's degree in law from the Seoul National University. He worked as a public prosecutor for over 26 years. He entered politics in June 2021 and was appointed as the presidential candidate from the People Power Party in 2021. Yoon was elected as the President of the Republic of Korea in March 2022 and took over office on May 10, 2022.
You're with us on DD India, still to come in this edition of DD India Live. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi joins the nation in paying tribute to our gurus on Teachers' Day. Niger's junta-appointed Prime Minister says talks with ECOWAS progressing. And North Korea's Kim Jong is set to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss the possibility of providing Moscow with weapons. Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Tanvi Taneja. India is celebrating Teachers' Day today, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has saluted everyone who works hard in the field of education. In a post on social media platform X, formerly Twitter, the Prime Minister said, and I quote him, "Teachers play a key role in building our future and inspiring dreams. On Teachers' Day, we salute them for their unwavering dedication and great impact." Unquote. The Indian Premier also interacted with the 75 winners of the National Teachers Award 2023 at his residence on Monday. The Prime Minister said he appreciates the efforts of teachers in nurturing the young minds of the country. He highlighted the importance of good teachers and the role they can play in shaping one's destiny and the destiny of the country at large. Indian President Draupadi Murmu will confer the National Teachers Award 2023 to 75 selected awardees at the Vigyan Bhavan in New Delhi today. The purpose of national awards to teachers is to celebrate and honor the unique contribution of teachers who, through their commitment and hard work, have only improved the quality of education but also enriched the lives of students. Still with India, Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has addressed the inaugural session of the ongoing Global FinTech Fest, which is being held in India's business capital, Mumbai, from the 5th of September. The second edition of the event aims to generate $15 to $20 million in funding for fintech ventures. The finance minister highlighted the need for building a responsible financial ecosystem.
Building a responsible financial ecosystem is important. It has to be, therefore, going back to the title, it has to be, therefore, inclusive, it has to be resilient, and it has to be sustainable. The challenges are we are aware of the challenges, they are before us. We know the various kinds of threats which are active even as we talk. And therefore, how are we going to be able to build it?
In Bangladesh, remittance dropped 21.5% in August, the steepest decline since the peak of the pandemic in 2020. It signals yet another blow to the country's dwindling dollar reserves, which stood at $23.06 billion at the end of August, with projections that it will slip below the $23 billion mark this week. North Korea's Kim Jong-un will be travelling to Russia to meet President Vladimir Putin this month, as per media reports. The two leaders will discuss the possibility of North Korea providing Moscow with weapons to support its war in Ukraine. Talks in Sochi, Russia, between the leaders of Russia and Turkey have yielded little result for the Black Sea grain deal. Moscow reiterated its position, demanding the West to address its concerns, while Ankara says it's hopeful that the deal could be revived soon, but urged Ukraine to soften its approaches. DD India correspondent Dasha Chernyshova has more from Moscow.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has reiterated Moscow's position on grain following talks with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Sochi on Monday. He said Moscow would be ready to return to the Black Sea grain deal once all agreements relevant to the arrangement are fulfilled. Putin also said that the Black Sea corridor should not be used for military purposes. Erdogan said at the press conference that he believed a solution could be found soon to revive the Black Sea grain deal, adding that Ukraine needs to soften its approaches in order for it to be possible for joint steps to be taken with Russia. In the meantime, Russian Ministry of Defense said its drones struck the Ukrainian shipbuilding enterprise, which assembled unmanned boats from imported components. And Russian Minister of Defense Sergei Shoigu said the attacks by Ukrainian naval drones were one of the reasons why Russia did not extend the Black Sea grain deal. Commenting on the Ukrainian counteroffensive, the Russian president said it was failing and said he hoped it would continue to be like this. Putin also stressed that Moscow has never refused to negotiate on the conflict in Ukraine. Dasha Chernyshova reporting in Moscow for DD India.
On to Africa now. Niger's junta-appointed Prime Minister Mahamane Lamine Zain said that talks with ECOWAS are ongoing, adding that he expects that the French troops will withdraw soon. The country's airspace has also been reopened by Niger's military leaders to all commercial flights after being shut in the wake of the August coup.
The government has already denounced the agreements that allow France to be on our territory. They are in an illegal position, and I think that the exchanges that are underway should very quickly enable these forces to withdraw from our country.
The Economic Community of Central African States has suspended Gabon's membership after a coup there late last month. The African Union's Peace and Security Council on Monday criticized the move by the military that toppled Gabonese President Ali Bongo. They also called for an immediate return to constitutional order in the country.
Any threat to peace, security and stability that may be made to any member state, as is currently being made by the Gabonese Republic, has repercussions in our countries at the same time. And peace in our community and peace in this sister country is also peace in the region of Central Africa. Our community must reinforce the implementation of the conclusions of the extraordinary summit of heads of state and government of the African Union on terrorism and unconstitutional changes.
On to America now. Thousands of people who were attending the Burning Man festival in the US state of Nevada are leaving after heavy rain and deep mud saw them stranded for days. DD India's US correspondent Kate Fisher has more.
It's meant to be a party in the desert, celebrating art and music. But torrential rain turned this year's Burning Man festival into a mud bath. On Friday, some 70,000 revellers were told to shelter in place and to conserve food and water as roads were impassable. Officials closed the exit to the remote site, which is 100 miles from the closest city. The police are also investigating the death of a man at the festival, though they say it doesn't appear to be related to the weather. Organisers said that they hoped vehicles would be able to leave by Monday afternoon, and indeed they began what they're calling the exodus. But they did urge people to wait until Tuesday if they could to try to ease the traffic congestion. That's because the exit's via an unpaved 5-mile or 8-kilometre dirt road out to the nearest highway. And even in normal years, leaving the festival can take up to 12 hours as thousands of cars and trailers creep off the desert and onto this jammed 2-lane road. Some of the festival goers, though, ignored the order to stay put over the weekend and they attempted to walk or drive out towards the highway. But others chose to stay and party on in the rain. Burning Man celebrates counterculture, and it originated in 1986 as a small gathering on a San Francisco beach. Now, though, it's attended by celebrities and social media influencers, and a regular ticket will cost you $575. President Joe Biden told reporters that he'd been briefed on the situation and that he was focused on getting everyone out. Kate Fisher in Washington, reporting for DD India.
More news on the weather. Typhoon Haikui has lost strength and has become a tropical storm after its landfall in southeast China. Thousands of people have been evacuated from at-risk areas as the storm rolled in after battering Taiwan for the past 2 days. Schools in Fuzhou city were closed and the city's observatory issued an alert for heavy rain. DD India correspondent Andrew Wood reports from Hong Kong.
Well, it's crossed the island of Taiwan. And it's rare for a typhoon to hit Taiwan directly on. That's, I think, the first time in 4 years. So people are being taken to safety. There's very, very heavy rain. It seems, though, that the typhoon has lost a lot of energy because it went across the island of Taiwan. Taiwan itself had tens of thousands of people had to be removed, taken to safety. And also, as well, about 140,000 at least people lost electricity. So it's Tuesday morning now in Taiwan. They're trying to restore that power. Well, up to 30 million people, by some estimates, have been warned about the typhoon and the effects. I think the Chinese coast is getting quite familiar with typhoons this year. This is the 11th typhoon of the season, and the 5th typhoon to actually hit the mainland of China. This one seems to, as I say, lost some energy. But I think it's going to be an interesting season, an interesting summer when people count up the damage, assess and estimate the damage done. For example, Typhoon Doksuri, just over a month ago, it hit the coast of China, and it was so powerful that it carried on inland for another 2,000 kilometers. That's very unusual. And it brought rain, and very heavy rain and flooding to Beijing, and then carried on into northeast China as well, where it caused havoc in an agricultural region too. So this has been a particularly bad typhoon season for China so far.
Now let's talk about the sudden downpours in Spain. 3 people are dead and others are missing after torrential rain caused heavy flooding in central Spain. The sudden downpour saw streets become rivers of mud, with roads and public transport shut down. Flood risks have been issued for almost half of the country. Rescue teams are being seen using helicopters to help people who sought refuge on the roofs of their homes and cars. Let's now take a look at other stories making news across the world. Chileans have gathered to commemorate the 1970 inauguration of former leftist president Salvador Allende, who was ousted by a military coup in 1973. Attendees at the rally left flowers and waved flags in a bid to highlight human rights abuses by the then dictatorship, while demanding justice for the victims and consequences for the perpetrators. The White House has confirmed that First Lady Jill Biden has tested positive for COVID-19. The administration says that President Joe Biden has also been tested, but coming back with a negative result. The US leader is set to arrive here in New Delhi on Thursday for the G20 summit. A video is going viral online. It has captured the moment a rock slide came crashing down on a Tennessee parking lot, happening after days of heavy rain. You're watching DD India Live. On to sporting action now. India has made it through to the Asia Cup's Super 4, defeating Nepal by 10 wickets in a rain-curtailed match at the Pallekele International Cricket Stadium. The men in blue chased down the revised target of 145 runs with 17 balls to spare. Winning the toss, skipper Rohit Sharma chose to bowl first. Nepal was off to a decent start, reaching 65 runs within the first 10 overs. Nepal was helped in part by some under-par fielding by India and at least 3 dropped catches within the first 5 overs. Indian bowlers applied the brakes on Nepali innings with regular wickets to bowl them out for 230 runs. Asif Sheikh top scored for Nepal with 58 runs. Ravindra Jadeja and Mohammad Siraj picked 3 wickets each. In reply, the opening pair of Shubman Gill and Rohit Sharma started well, reaching 17 runs in 2.1 overs before rain interruption reduced the target to 145 runs in 23 overs. The unbroken stand of Rohit Sharma and Shubman Gill helped India score 147 runs in 20.1 overs. Rohit Sharma top scored for India with 74 runs, while Shubman Gill made 67. So that's all we have for you in this edition of DD India Live. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at DD India Live. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching. Namaskar.